sometimes when you're a beginner, you just want to be told where to start. So if you were to twist my arm and say, hey, Khan, what do you use to paint miniatures? These are the things that I use. I should start and say that I am not being endorsed for or sponsored in any way whatsoever for any of the things that I am mentioning. These are things that I utilize, and I can't even promise to you that they are going to be the best things. These are things that I have been working with and have grown accustomed to and probably generally like. With that being said, let's get straight into it. So paint lines, we all grow in different ways and we try different things out. And I've tried a whole skew of different stuff out. Pro acrylic, scale 75, Kimera, I've got oil paints, I have inks, and I've got enamels. But most commonly, the thing that I use are Kimera colors. I just really like them. They have a nice range of paints now. They're expanding kind of frequently. They're super high pigment. They just really work for me. Now, I need to say something about them, which is I do not think that they are the very best starting colors for people. And what I mean by this is that they take a little bit of more effort in, or you need to be more comfortable in mixing your colors to create the thing that you want. So what's nice about certain ranges, Pro acrylic is one of them, even Games Workshop Citadel paints, is that they make a whole skew, I mean tons and tons of paints of individually slightly different types of pigment paints out there. So if you want a red, well, there's like 5 reds for them, you know, or if there's a blue, there's a whole skew of, you know, like their base tone, mid-tones, highlights and stuff like that. And I tend to find that I work with mixing and adding colors together to create my highlights, my mid-tones and various stuff. So I don't need nearly as many unique colors or near similar colors as other ones, you know, if that makes any sense. These have agitator balls in them, which are very good, and I just think they're a great company. They're a bit expensive, and they are a little hard to get. They're all the way from Italy, so, you know, like if you live in the United States, Monument are so much easier to get, or the Pro Acrylic line, than that. I also use as an airbrush, I utilize the Cult of Paint Infinity. What you need when it comes to an airbrush is a gravity feed, which is effectively, it utilizes gravity. You place paint into this sort of pot here, and it feeds through, and it fires out through the hole. You want a good one. I don't know enough about various kinds of airbrushes about how good any single thing is. I guess the trick about buying something like this is getting a reputable brand. Now, the Cult of Paint is they do YouTube videos. They have some phenomenal painters on there. And when I was just starting, I had no idea. I was like, I'm going to buy, here's a phenomenal painter telling me this is the airbrush. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to find out. Infinity, there is a Harden Steenbeck, I believe is the company, which is a German company, and they make a whole bunch of airbrushes. Getting an airbrush from them, I don't think you can go wrong. When it comes to getting a compressor, I use a Sparmax, I don't know, it's like a Sparmax Airism. Now, I actually think there's a little problem with this one, but this is, again, I bought this when I didn't know as much as I do now. One of the problems with this unit is that it does not have a regulator gauge to control the amount of PSI. And that's kind of a no-go, in my opinion now, after doing it for a while. It comes with an attachment that you can apply to the bottom of your airbrush, and it's got a dial on it which controls the amount of air pressure, so you can kind of tighten it. But it doesn't mean you know how much something is. And so if you're used to being exacting and really dialing something in, I can't really do that. So that's kind of a nuisance with it, but it was cheap. I mean, cheap is relative, I suppose, but it's actually quite effective. It has worked for me regardless, and I don't feel like I really need to go out and buy another one, but I do know that it's something that if I could go back and buy another compressor, I would probably buy one. I know that I wouldn't probably, I absolutely would buy one with a regulator that I could control the PSI on. So wherever you go with that, That's up to you. So when it comes to brushes that I use, I've been moving around all over the place. I've been using Winsor Newton, Broken Toad, Raphael's. I even bought some Squidmar ones, variety of things. Oh, and DaVinci. I bought Artist Opus ones, Rosemary Co. There's a whole bunch of them out there. What that kind of says, and you might not know those names, is that they are all sort of Kolinsky Sable brushes. Kolinsky Sable is a big deal to me. And what I mean by this is because synthetic brushes, though you can buy a whole ton of them for little money, and that's great, they have no longevity to them. And also, the paintbrush, I suppose when I utilize them, it doesn't move in a way that I like anymore. There's a sort of springiness that exists in the Kolinsky Sable that you grow accustomed to, and it's something that you want rather than what the synthetic brushes do. I've also tried a bunch of synthetic brushes that try to mimic Kolinsky, and every single one of them has sadly failed. I've never come across one where I'm like, oh, this is even remotely like a Kolinsky. With this being said, though I recommend going into Kolinsky, finding them, the problem with this is that A, they're expensive, and B, you can just buy bad ones. And this is really a kind of a tricky position in our industry. They get used for making paintbrushes. They become expensive brushes. And then you can buy them, and then they could be crap. They could literally fail on you the first time you use them. And so you'll find that I can't tell you how kind of frustrating that this position is when it comes to buying brushes. I've had lots of Winsor Newtons of like Series 7 or something like that fail on me the first time I use them. And so I've stopped buying Winsor Newton at this moment in time until hopefully at some point I start hearing really good things and I might go back to them. I've been using Broken Toad and I really like the Broken Toad stuff. But still occasionally I get ones that are a little iffy. You go into it knowing that you're going to spend a bit of money. So this is really a thing that you only do when you have gotten a lot more invested into the hobby and you find that you don't mind spending that money and you want to buy the best brushes you can. Because they are the best brushes, the Kolinsky Sable stuff, but they do come with a problem a lot of the time. So let's talk about the wet palette. So I use the Redgrass wet palette. You know, it's classic. It comes with a sponge. You can buy these pre-cut parchment paper type things, which if you're lazy and you just don't want to you don't want to buy some parchment paper and cut it out yourself, you can do this. I actually have stopped buying their stuff and I actually do cut them myself at this point, but I have some leftover, so I'm just kind of going through that at this point of time. It works well. It's a little expensive and you can absolutely make one yourself and it'd be just as good as this thing, if not perhaps even better. It does the trick. I like it. I like its low profile. That's kind of the thing that works best for me, is that it's got a very low lip to it. And so it's easy for me to just get my hand. I don't have to touch something if it's like too high. And there isn't a whole lot more that needs to be said about it. If you want to take your painting a step further, I cannot not recommend highly enough getting a wet palette and working with it. It can and will change your painting in a way that is just like hard to describe. One of the things about what I personally use and what I like, or what I've grown to like, I'm going to put a bunch of links in our description in this video. So if you're interested, you can totally take a look at it and it will be there available for you to just check out and see what's there, or what is available. You know, there are lots of different types of brush soaps out there, but this, the Masters brush soap is just an absolute classic. You cannot go wrong with this stuff, and you can buy it in big jars and it's not that expensive. So that's great. But, you know, like glues and various things like this, I think the Tamaya extra thin cement stuff is excellent. Just a really good glue. If you've also got an airbrush kind of business, I think the Ultra Varnish matte stuff from AK Interactive is excellent. This stuff is like, I do not think there's anything more matte than this stuff out on the market, to my knowledge. And even things that are matte have a little bit of a sheen to it. This has like practically no sheen of any kind. But obviously you need to like kind of practice and try different things out to see what you actually like. I also have a bunch of AK Interactive terrain kind of business. This natural texture for earth is probably the one I use the most. just add a little bit of water to it, put it on the ground. I have a little bit of like sand and rubble that I kind of like sprinkle onto things. And that's like a great place to get the base of my base. And because painting or this miniature thing is like a journey and you're kind of expanding bit by bit, slowly and more slowly, I ended up buying a bunch of stuff from a company called DioramaPresepe, where we have all of this different type of terrain stuff that you could buy. And I love that kind of stuff because I just take a little bit of it at a time, chop bits of it up, and then add it to a terrain base to give it more life. But it's a wonderful way of getting like nature down on a scene without adding, without having to do too much. The problem with that though is that it costs money to buy that kind of stuff and you don't necessarily need to. I mean, kind of with that, that's like the predominant stuff I use. There are other things, like little things, I use inks a little bit, like Liquitex inks. I also use some of these oil paints, but oil paints require a wholly different set of various tools to make use of them, like odorless spirits and things like that. And they don't really work on a wet palette because it's like oil and water and that doesn't function. So going into this place is not, you don't need to start here, though there are some very interesting applications for oil, and that's a wholly different topic, but there are a bunch of cool things that can be done. One other thing that I really like is this holder from Rathcore, V-Grip. It's a little pricey, so I don't necessarily fully recommend it, but what I really like about it is this metal stand thing here, because it gives me so much more control to apply my painting hand onto this piece here while painting. It just allows me to stabilize this hand, which is really, really useful. They come in various different sizes, so if I'm working with like a 75mm, they make one that's like yay large and make them so this. And it has just been a really good tool. Like the problem with, say, the Games Workshop one, which I also use and, very much like, is that it just doesn't have that bit. But you can buy these for so much cheaper, and so it's a bit like, you can still paint, you don't need that. It's just something that I like, and grown accustomed to. So with that out of the way, that's like all the stuff I use. And hopefully that gives you some insight, helps you just understand, like, you don't need crazy amounts of stuff, but there's still some cool things out there. And, hopefully that this video was interesting or insightful or give you some ideas about how you might progress or if things that you might need for your journey. If you guys like this video, please, press the like, subscribe, it would be extraordinarily helpful. We're going to be creating more and more videos about deep diving into various aspects of our hobby. Leave a comment if there's anything that you think is excellent, super cool, or stuff that you're, interested or excited about, or various things that you think that I'm totally skipping on. That would be great. And yeah, that's really it. So it's me, I'm signing off from now, and until the next video.